Entre 10 años cuando yo me fui a las calles.
Shorty wasn't alone. An entire generation of Guatemalan children lost their families. At the beginning of the 20th century, the US-owned United Fruit Company was the largest landowner and employer in Guatemala, producing crops that were sold in the United States and Europe for a great profit. The United Fruit Company invested in shipping ports, railroads, telephone lines, and hospitals. But they also exaggerated the contrast between Guatemala's wealthy elites and its working poor, because the bulk of the system relied on unskilled, desperately underpaid Guatemalans. By the mid-20th century, the United States fought hard to prevent the expansion of communism in almost every corner of the globe. This included Guatemala in the 1950s. The democratically elected president, Dr. Jacobo Arbenz, promoted the Agrarian Reform Law, which included the redistribution of unused land from the United Fruit Company to landless Guatemalans. Many in the United States government interpreted land redistribution as communist, including Alan Dulles, the director of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, who was also a board member of the United Fruit Company. And on the morning of June 18, 1954, the CIA dropped leaflets in Guatemala City demanding the resignation of the president. Amid a confused scramble for power, Carlos Castillo Armas was declared president. He quickly reversed the nation's recent land reforms, forcing peasant villagers to vacate their property. Over the next decade, the Guatemalan government militarized, as the people of Guatemala slowly mounted an organized resistance in the name of democracy.
People that had no other option but to take arms decided that they would do so against the establishment, which in this case was marked by military government. The answer was obviously an unproportioned answer by the military, killing not only the insurgency, but also the communities, whoever they saw as a threat. Although they started out with trying to get control of the areas and fighting the guerrillas, eventually it led to widespread massacres of thousands of people in hundreds of communities. Guatemala's mined with graves. The Guatemalan Forensic Anthropology Foundation has recovered 4,700 human remains. All but one of these have been victims of massacres or killings in the communities. If you look at the commission report, about 83% of the victims were indigenous. So when you start looking at those specific cases and whether people were killed because of the fact that they were indigenous or because they spoke a different language, then yeah, you're talking about acts of genocide. About 25% of the victims that we work with are children. So 47 years old, you're crying, shot in the head. Smaller kids usually were taken by arms and legs and, either burnt or smashed up against a tree or a rock. According to the testimony, because you can't prove rape through the bones, but according to the testimony, women were repeatedly raped. And all these things I'm mentioning to you are systematic over the entire country.
The 36-year conflict killed over 200,000 people and forcibly displaced another million. As the war continued, the Army's scorched earth policy destroyed over 450 Mayan villages. Farmers lost their homes and their farming tradition. They were left without a means to survive.
So you have people fleeing from the violence, coming to a city with lack of opportunity, lack of food, lack of resources altogether. And that's how you have the formation of all of these shanty towns, all of these asentamientos, they call it in Spanish.
One of these squatter settlements is the Guatemala City Dump. The Guatemala City Dump is the largest in Central America. 24 football fields would fit within its walls. Almost 1,500 tons of trash, the equivalent of 35 Boeing 737 airplanes, is deposited there every day. 11,000 people live near and work in the dump as a means for survival.
Esta comunidad se forma a raíz de la guerra civil. Después de la guerra civil que hubo en Guatemala, la gente no tenía medios de trabajo en el área rural y migra a la ciudad. Cree que va a encontrar la solución a sus problemas. Y lo que encuentra es falta de trabajo. Empieza hace 20 años más o menos a acomodarse la gente en este lugar y lo que hacen, toman tierras y las toman como propias. Aún no se las ha dado nadie, pero ellos se apropian. Ellos empiezan a trabajar con la basura como un medio de vida para sustentar, para poder alcanzar medios económicos para sufragar sus necesidades. Ese trabajo es despreciado, la gente no quiere tratar con ellos. Y todo lo que esté relacionado con la basura es despreciable. Y la gente lo empieza a creer. Incluso hay gente que cree que es parte de la basura.
We walk to the edge of the National Cemetery, which overlooks the dump, to get a better perspective. Surrounded by vultures above and below, people rummage through trash, searching for discarded treasure. They're called scavengers because their work consists of scavenging through filthy rubbish, collecting bits of plastic, cardboard, glass, and metal waste, anything that could have some value. Most scavengers work from 7 to 14 hours a day, in rain or shine, scavenging for their day's needs. In the US, we recycle because it's good for the environment. In Guatemala, some people recycle as a means of survival.